What it do? What it do? You know what to do. Like, subscribe, share, comment to my YouTube channel. Most definitely hit that bell icon. That's the notification bell that alert you all content that I drop that will hit your devices. So you want the latest, you want the exclusive. You don't want to miss none of my content. Make sure you hit that bell icon, and trust me, you won't miss nothing. You will be notified immediately as soon as I drop the content. Also, make sure you hit the thumbs up, the AKA the like button. You're looking for the thumbs up button. It's at the top right hand side. Hit the three buttons, hit the three dots, and you will see the like button. Also, make sure you hit the subscribe button. I need everybody to go double back and spin the block. Go to my second YouTube channel, S.L.R Sports News TV. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, comment over there. All helps my channel grow, get more viewers, more subscribers, pushes both of my channels further into the YouTube algorithm to get noticed. So it's very important that y'all like, subscribe, share, comment on both of my YouTube channels. Also, I, I need everybody to give me a minimum of 25 to 50 likes on this video. Let's get that. Support the channel. Let me get 25 to 50 likes on this video. You like the content, you like what I do, make sure you hit the Cash App, $SRED 40. Shout out to my subscribers. Shout out to my future subscribers. You see the title. You see the title. Mexican cartel leader. Rest in peace, El Mencho. Cjng. Mexican war on drug lords part 4. You know, I told y'all we ain't here. This is part 4 to the series of El Mencho, the Mexican drug lord. Told you we're gonna break it down. We're gonna package up and ship it in accordingly. And as I say, we breaking it down how the El Mencho came to where he at, and how did it led up to the United States and the Mexican government teaming together to bring down the most powerful cartel man in the world. And the lady that's in the picture right now, was she in with the Mexican government, the CIA, and the United States government of bringing El Mencho down? Because this is the woman that was last with El Mencho before the Mexican government, the army, took him out. Like I said, a man with over $50 billion was tagged and brought down by a female. So we most definitely gonna get into it. We're gonna break it down. I told y'all we in Mexico. We're not leaving till we get the full-blown answers and give everybody the answers of what they need about El Mencho. Cologne, what up, yo? What do you say? We here, most definitely. We here. We in the building. Yeah, S.L.R, most definitely. So we about to get into it. Let's go ahead, break it down, repackage it up. Let's go ahead and get into the content. El Mencho, the Mexican drug lord, the biggest drug lord in the world, was no more. And so who's the successor now? Who has taken over Cjng? Let's get into it.
One of the most powerful cartels on the planet means El Mencho isn't counting stacks, he's counting billions. The scale of Cjng's operation is almost hard to wrap your head around. Just from drugs like cocaine, fentanyl, and methamphetamine, estimates say the cartel pulls in well over $15 billion a year. Over time, that kind of money gave Cjng a war chest that rivals legitimate global corporations. One former DEA agent even said that Cjng and its financial arm, Los Quines, had more money than the Sinaloa cartel. That's saying a lot. So how do you even make and hide that much cash? The short answer: diversify everything. Unlike older cartels that mostly focused on drugs, Cjng transformed itself into a full-blown criminal corporation. Narcotics are still the backbone, of course. One of their biggest side businesses has been stealing oil and gasoline by tapping directly into Mexico's pipelines, a practice known as huachicol. According to government reports, this alone has cost Mexico billions in revenue. By the mid-2020s, Cjng was reportedly making hundreds of millions a year just from stolen fuel. On top of that, U.S. investigators uncovered their involvement in scams like ripping off tourists and retirees with fake vacation deals, along with other white-collar crimes designed to wash dirty money. But making money is only half the job. Hiding it is just as important. To do that, El Mencho followed a classic cartel strategy. Funnel the cash into businesses that appear totally normal. Throughout the 2010s, front companies tied to his family and inner circle popped up all over Jalisco. In 2015, the U.S. Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, dropped the hammer.
The man who helped lead the operation that killed Mexican drug lord El Mencho had his own life changed back in 2020, when gunmen disguised as road workers sprayed his vehicle with more than 400 bullets. 44-year-old Omar Garcia Harfuch, Mexico's current security chief, survived the attack, while two of his bodyguards and a bystander lost their lives. Since then, Harfuch has spent his days and nights inside fortified office buildings. He blamed El Mencho for the attempt on his life, so bringing down the brutal cartel leader was a deeply personal moment for Harfuch. Journalist Oscar Bauman specializes in organized crime and public security.
Es una paradoja que casi 6 años después.
It is a paradox that almost 6 years later, he personally supervised the military operation in Talpalpa, Jalisco, which ends with the killing of El Mencho. It's kind of a circular story, almost like good versus evil. Two men who represent positions and also completely opposing ideas.
Cargos y además ideas completamente opuestas.
Harfuch declined to comment for the story. The account is based on interviews with a dozen friends, colleagues, and security experts. Two sources who have worked with Harfuch say his mix of police and military heritage puts him in a unique position to serve as Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum's Minister of Security and Citizen Protection.
Both his father and his grandfather have been members of, or key members of the security forces for a number of decades.
Gladys McCormick is a professor of history at Syracuse University.
He is showing himself to be unbelievably savvy and very knowledgeable in terms of how to kind of manage some of the pressures that he is, the Sheinbaum administration is experiencing from the Trump administration. I think he's known how to read the room, and he's known how to kind of guide her in terms of being a partner to her, with how to respond to Marco Rubio and some of the other individuals from the U.S. government. And I think that reading and the timing of the response from Mexico has been unbelievably astute.
Harfuch has emerged as a linchpin for the United States in the security collaboration with Mexico, as U.S. President Donald Trump continues to pile on pressure to aggressively combat cartels. Harfuch is credited with spearheading a more aggressive approach to fighting cartels, and the death of El Mencho has lifted his profile so much that he's considered an early frontrunner for the presidency when Sheinbaum's term ends in 2030. In the meantime, those close to Harfuch say he's unlikely to let his guard down now that El Mencho is gone. The cartel leader's death triggered a wave of violence across Mexico that killed 25 National Guard members and could fuel deadly feuds as rival cartel factions fight for control.
Sí, gracias.
U.S. launches a huge operation to eradicate all cartels after El Mencho's death.
Following the reported death of El Mencho, the United States has launched a massive, unprecedented operation aimed at dismantling every major cartel network. Now the cartels are retaliating in the worst possible way, and it's more deadly than anyone thought. Here's the full gist. The fall of El Mencho. On the morning of February 22nd, 2026, while most of Mexico was still asleep, a convoy of Mexican special forces was already moving through the rugged mountainous terrain of Tapalpa, Jalisco, closing in on the most wanted drug lord on the planet. Nemesio Ruben Oseguera Cervantes, the man the world knew as El Mencho, the founder and supreme leader of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, had a 15 million US bounty on his head and had evaded capture for over a decade. But on this particular Sunday morning, his luck was about to run out in the most violent and dramatic fashion imaginable. The operation had been weeks, possibly months in the making. Intelligence gathered by Mexican authorities, bolstered by data from the newly formed U.S. Joint Interagency Task Force Counter Cartel, a military-led unit launched just 1 month earlier specifically to map cartel networks along the U.S.-Mexico border, had finally pinpointed El Mencho's location. He was hiding in a remote compound in the southern mountains of Jalisco, an area that had long served as a Cjng stronghold, protected by armed guards carrying the kind of firepower you'd expect to see on an actual battlefield. Security Secretary Omar Garcia Harfuch oversaw the coordination of the entire mission, and the plan was clear: capture El Mencho alive. That plan went sideways almost immediately. Sometime around dawn, approximately 5 to 6 a.m. local time, Mexican Special Forces, supported by the Mexican Air Force and National Guard, launched the raid. The troops approached the compound expecting resistance, but what they encountered was something else entirely. El Mencho's guards opened fire with everything they had. We're talking rocket launchers, armored vehicles, military-grade weapons, the full arsenal of a paramilitary organization that had spent years preparing for exactly this kind of confrontation. The firefight that erupted was intense, chaotic, and absolutely deadly. Within the first 2 hours of the shootout, 4 Cjng gunmen were killed on the spot. 3 others, including El Mencho himself, sustained severe gunshot wounds, described as multiple rounds to vital areas. 3 Mexican soldiers were also injured in the exchange, though all 3 survived. 2 additional cartel operatives were arrested, and when the dust settled, forces seized armored vehicles, rocket launchers, and a stockpile of weapons that confirmed just how heavily fortified El Mencho's hideout truly was. Now here's the part that changed everything. After the shooting stopped, the wounded were stabilized on site and airlifted via military aircraft toward Mexico City for emergency medical treatment, which was standard protocol for high-value targets. El Mencho was alive when they put him on that aircraft. He was bleeding heavily, his body riddled with gunshot wounds, but he was breathing. The plan was still to get him to a hospital, to interrogate him, to put him on trial, to make an example out of the man who had built a criminal empire that stretched across 6 continents. But El Mencho never made it to Mexico City.
The trillionaire life of El Mencho before his death.
His name is Nemesio Cervantes, but he is the head of the Cjng cartel, otherwise known as the Jalisco Cartel.
He was a 5th grade dropout who picked avocados barefoot in the dirt and built a $1 trillion criminal empire spanning 40 countries, with sushi restaurants, Bengal tigers, tequila brands, and enough fentanyl to kill millions. And the one weakness that brought it all crashing down, no one saw it coming. Let's get into it. From avocado fields to federal prison. Nemesio Ruben Oseguera Cervantes was born on July 17, 1966, in a village called Naranjo de Chila in the municipality of Aguililla, Michoacán. His family farmed avocados. They were poor. He was one of 6 brothers: Juan, Miguel, Antonio, Marin, and Abraham. At least 2 of those brothers, Antonio and Abraham, would later end up deep in his criminal operations. He dropped out of school around age 10 or 11 to work in the fields. By 14, he had moved on from avocados. He was guarding marijuana plantations for local groups tied to emerging cartels. This was common in Michoacán's Tierra Caliente region, a harsh, dry stretch of land where poverty and limited job prospects pushed young men toward the drug trade as a matter of routine. In the mid-1980s, still a teenager or barely into his 20s, he crossed the border illegally into the United States. He settled in California's San Francisco Bay Area, bouncing between San Francisco, Redwood City, and Sacramento. He used aliases: Ruben Avila, Jose Lopez Prieto, Miguel Valadez, Carlos Hernandez Mendoza, Roberto Salgado to stay under the radar. He didn't stay under it for long. His first arrest came in 1986. The San Francisco Police Department picked him up for stolen property and carrying a loaded firearm. He was 19 or 20 years old. There's a mugshot from that arrest, a young man in a blue hoodie. It would become one of only a handful of public photos of him that would ever exist. In 1989, he was arrested again in San Francisco, this time for selling narcotics. He was deported to Mexico. He came back. The arrest that changed everything happened in September 1992 in Sacramento. He and his brother Abraham were caught up in a federal heroin case. Abraham sold 5 ounces of heroin to undercover officers at a bar called the Imperial for $9,500. El Mencho was the lookout. Wiretap recordings caught him warning Abraham that the buyers looked suspicious, but they went through with it anyway. Facing a jury trial he was unlikely to win, he pleaded guilty to conspiracy to distribute heroin in 1994 in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California.
See, Mencho was about that bread. He was about that money, and he learned early how to get that bread. So anybody want to know the mentality of thinking of El Mencho, you got to understand how he was raised, how he grew up, and who he was around, how he got accustomed, how he learned the business. And but you know what they always say: money and women are the rule of all evil. If El Mencho was here right now, would El Mencho spend his last nights with the women in this picture right now? Would El Mencho spend his last nights with this woman right now if he knew he wasn't going to be here today? Let me know. Smash that like button, hit that subscribe button. Let's get 50 to 100 likes on this video. Hit that cash.
What happened to the soldiers who killed El Mencho?
When you had the defense secretary talk about the death of the soldiers and 25 soldiers killed is an enormous loss for the Mexican military. Imagine that on a single day.
El Mencho was finally killed in a high-risk military operation that was meant to end years of cartel violence. But instead of closure, it reportedly triggered brutal retaliation. With reports of dozens of soldiers killed, the aftermath is raising serious concerns about the price paid by the soldiers who took him down. The retaliation when Cjng set Mexico on fire. Within hours of news spreading that El Mencho was dead, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel activated every cell it had, not just in Jalisco, but across at least 20 Mexican states simultaneously. What unfolded over the next 48 hours was described by experts as the most widespread and coordinated retaliatory campaign in modern Mexican cartel history. Not spontaneous, organized, strategic, but to understand why the cartel responded the way it did, with that kind of speed, that kind of coordination, that kind of fury, you first need to understand who they just lost. We'll get there. But right now, let's start with what the world saw first. The first tactic was the narco blockade, a method Cjng had been refining for years, but which it now deployed on a scale the country had never seen. Over 252 separate incidents were reported in the initial hours and days. Vehicles commandeered, set on fire, and used to block major highways, urban arteries, and access roads to airports and cities across 20-plus states. Spikes and nails were thrown across roads. Buses were hijacked and turned into burning barricades.
I mean, this tactic, which has a term for it called the narco blockade. And we first started hearing this term about 20 years ago in the 2000s.
And this time, it was on a scale never seen before. Not in 2019 Culiacan, not anywhere.
And it got bigger and bigger till you saw in 2019 shutting down a whole city in Culiacan, Sinaloa. And then we've seen this on a new scale.
252 different incidents, schools shut, the whole country in shock, and simultaneously cartel members fanned out to torch civilian infrastructure. Supermarkets, banks, restaurants, convenience stores, including OXXO locations and even a Costco in Puerto Vallarta, were set on fire. Gas stations were targeted, public buses were lit up. In Puerto Vallarta, a Pacific Coast tourist hub, El Mencho's own home turf, streets filled with smoke and flame. This wasn't random rage. It was coordinated theater, a demonstration, as one academic put it, of violent lobbying, the use of extreme visible force to send the government a message, back off.
And one academic called Ben Lessing has a term, he calls it violent lobbying. You use violence to try and get the government, to lobby the government to back off.
But the cartel wasn't just sending a message to civilians and politicians. They were going after the people who pulled the trigger, the soldiers, the National Guard, in at least 6 separate ambushes and attacks, primarily in Jalisco. Army showed up at El Mencho's funeral organized by the cartel. Then this happened. They killed El Mencho, Mexico's most wanted man, dead, but his cartel had one final demand, a funeral, armed gunmen, thousands of loyalists, all converging on one location. The army had 2 choices, let it happen or show up. They showed up, and what followed was hell. The body, the burial, and the cartel's goodbye. On February 22, 2026, the most wanted man in the entire Western Hemisphere was killed by the Mexican military. His name was Nemesio Ruben Oseguera Cervantes, but the world knew him as El Mencho, the founder and iron-fisted leader of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or Cjng, one of the most dominant and violent criminal syndicates in Mexico, a man with a $15 million bounty on his head, a man whose empire stretched across 6 of 7 continents, and now he was dead. But here's the thing nobody was prepared for. It wasn't just the killing that shook Mexico to its very foundations. It was what happened after. It was the body, the question of what to do with it, the whispered plans for a funeral, and the terrifying, very real possibility that the most powerful drug cartel in the Western Hemisphere was going to organize a burial ceremony for their fallen leader, and that the Mexican army was going to show up at that funeral. What followed was a chain of events so chaotic, so deeply disturbing, and so consequential that by the time the dust had settled, over 73 people were dead, 250 roadblocks had turned entire highways into war zones, and a nation of over 130 million people was forced to lock its doors and pray. So let's start from the moment the bullet entered his body. Let's start from the very beginning. And let's not leave a single detail out, because this story, every single agonizing piece of it, deserves to be told in full. The small town of Tapalpa is a quiet mountainous settlement roughly 2 hours southwest of Guadalajara, nestled in the kind of rugged terrain that makes it a perfect hideout for a man who has been running from governments for years. And that is precisely why El Mencho was there. According to Mexico's Defense Secretary, General Ricardo Trevilla, the military had been tracking one of El Mencho's romantic partners for days. On February 20th, a trusted associate was monitored transporting that romantic partner to a rural property in Tapalpa. By February 21st, surveillance had confirmed not only El Mencho's presence at that location, but also the presence of a fully armed security detail surrounding the property. The net was closing, and El Mencho had no idea.
This was a very, very effective takedown of one of the biggest leaders, and it was done, based on the intelligence that they conducted primarily.
The Mexican Army, the National Guard, the Mexican Air Force, and the Attorney General's office all coordinated a joint assault that began before the sun had even thought about rising on February 22nd. Ground troops established a cordon around the property. Air support circled overhead, and when the order was given, the assault team moved in and immediately walked straight into a hailstorm of gunfire. Army showed up at El Mencho's funeral organized by the cartel. Then this happened. They killed El Mencho, Mexico's most wanted man, dead, but his cartel had one final. El Mencho's last words just leaked, and they're shocking. For years he moved like a ghost, untouchable, unreachable, protected by layers of loyalty and violence. Governments hunted him, rivals feared him, entire regions whispered his name, and then, in the span of a few chaotic minutes, it was over.
Cuartítala y dátelas de comer a los tigres. Vámonos, cabrones.
Those weren't the words of a man begging for mercy. They were the final recorded threats of El Mencho, a cartel boss who, even with military forces closing in on February 22, 2026, sounded more like he was preparing for battle than facing the end. No hesitation, no surrender, just defiance. These are El Mencho's last words, and they're shocking. The last words. The title of this story is about one thing, what El Mencho said before he died. So let's start there. On the night of February 22, 2026, Nemesio Ruben Oseguera Cervantes, known to the world as El Mencho, was killed during a military operation in Tapalpa, Jalisco. He was the head of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or Cjng, one of the most powerful criminal organizations on the planet. The U.S. had a $15 million bounty on his head. Mexico had a 30 million peso reward posted for information leading to his arrest. And then, shortly after his death was confirmed, an audio clip surfaced online.
Escúchame bien, güey. Nos cayeron a la verga, nos vendió la hija de su puta madre de la...
That clip was posted on X, formerly Twitter, and attributed to El Mencho in his final moments. In it, you can hear him mid-conversation, addressing someone named Wayne.
Abuela la pinche perra, hija de puta de la María Julita. Si no te contacto, manda a quebrar a la verga toda su puta descendencia de...
He's not bargaining, he's not surrendering, he's giving orders.
Cuartítala y dátelas de comer a los tigres. Vámonos, cabrones.
Those are believed to be among the last recorded words of one of the most wanted men in the world, and they tell you everything about who El Mencho was, a man who, even when cornered, was still issuing threats, still commanding violence, still operating as though he was untouchable, but he wasn't untouchable, not anymore. To understand why this audio exists and why it matters, you have to understand how the operation that killed him came together. According to Mexican Defense Secretary Ricardo Trevilla, military intelligence had been monitoring El Mencho's network for months. The breakthrough came when they identified a trusted associate who was connected to one of El Mencho's romantic partners.
El 20 de febrero, mediante trabajos de inteligencia militar central, se ubicó un hombre de confianza de una de las parejas.
That associate escorted the woman to a secluded cabin on the outskirts of Tapalpa on February 20th. She met El Mencho there and stayed the night.
Parejas sentimentales del Mencho que la trasladó a una instalación en el poblado de Tapalpa, Jalisco. En ese lugar se reunió con el Mencho.
The next day she left, but El Mencho stayed, and that's when the military moved in. On February 21st, the planning began. By the early hours of February 22, the operation was underway.
Then they got El Mencho chilling in the woods in a secluded area. And El Mencho, he wasn't staying in like no BS, nothing crazy. He was staying in something normal, functional, nice little hideout. But once again, mostly all the cartel guys has been caught or been dead. And so he's just one of the many. Cartel guys, you can run, but you can't hide. Let me see if I got the hideout where let me see if I got it where El Mencho was staying at. Let's see. He even got his career.
From a simple vendor to the... From a simple...
It's one of them though, but we do got the crib that El Mencho was chilling in. I'll find it a little bit. Let's get back to the content.
El Mencho's last girlfriend sends a chilling message to Americans after his death. Did they really track him through his girlfriend? When El Mencho died, his cartel unleashed hell across 20 states, dozens dead, airports shut down, tourists trapped. Then a woman connected to the kingpin allegedly sent a chilling message to Americans. What's behind that claim is far more disturbing. The ghost they couldn't catch. On February 22, 2026, Mexican Special Forces killed the most wanted man in the Western Hemisphere, Nemesio Ruben Oseguera Cervantes, known as El Mencho. The 59-year-old founder and leader of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel died during a raid in Tapalpa, Jalisco. He was wounded in a firefight alongside two of his bodyguards and bled out in a military helicopter while being airlifted toward Mexico City. Within hours, his cartel responded the only way it knew how. Road blockades went up in over 20 of Mexico's 32 states. Vehicles and businesses were torched, and coordinated clashes between cartel gunmen and security forces left dozens dead within the first 48 hours alone. Smoke poured over resort cities. Tourists barricaded themselves inside hotel rooms, and airports shut down across the country's Pacific coast. And then, as the fires were still burning, a story started spreading online that would eclipse even the carnage itself. A claim that El Mencho's last girlfriend, a young, attractive social media personality, had betrayed him to authorities and then sent a chilling, direct message to Americans after his death. That headline rocketed across X, TikTok, Facebook, and dozens of clickbait outlets within hours, racking up millions of views. But to understand why that claim broke the internet, what actually happened in that mountain cabin, and what the real fallout looks like for both Mexico and the United States, you first need to understand the man they just put in the ground. Because El Mencho didn't just run a cartel. He built an empire that reshaped the entire drug trade, and the story of how he went from a dirt-poor kid in rural Mexico to the most feared narco on the planet is the foundation of everything that followed.
Cartels launch deadly attack on the U.S. Marines decimate them with extreme force.
Under the orders I signed today, we will also be designating the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations.
The United States has just declared war on the Mexican drug cartels. American warships now prowl the Caribbean, and precision airstrikes have already left dozens dead. But the cartels aren't backing down. They're arming up with drones, anti-aircraft systems, and soldiers once trained by U.S. Special Forces. And if you think that's terrifying, wait until you see what they're planning next for us Americans. The escalation. Within hours of Trump's inauguration, he issued the Executive Order 157, titled Designating Cartels and Other Organizations as Foreign Terrorist Organizations and Specially Designated Global Terrorists. This wasn't just paperwork, this was the legal foundation for everything that would follow, a framework that would transform Mexican drug cartels from prosecutable criminals into targetable enemies of the state. The order explicitly declared a national emergency under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, initiating what officials called a rapid interagency process to label transnational criminal groups as foreign terrorist organizations under the Immigration and Nationality Act. The Trump administration specifically targeted major cartels, including the Sinaloa Cartel and the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, known as Cjng, along with groups like Tren de Aragua from Venezuela and MS-13 from El Salvador and Honduras. Why this aggressive approach? The administration pointed to a staggering statistic. Fentanyl overdoses are responsible for over 100,000 American deaths annually. Trump's team framed this as nothing less than chemical warfare, an existential threat that justified treating these organizations exactly like Al-Qaeda or ISIS.
Under the orders I signed today, we will also be designating the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. I will direct our government to use the full and immense power of federal and state law enforcement to eliminate the presence of all foreign gangs and criminal networks bringing devastating crime to U.S. soil, including our cities and inner cities.
But the Foreign Terrorist Organization designation wasn't just symbolic. It unlocked an arsenal of counter-terrorism tools that had previously been reserved for groups like Al-Qaeda. Immediately, these labels imposed asset freezes, travel bans, and prohibitions on U.S. persons providing any material support, whether funds or logistics, even indirectly. By March 2025, the Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control had issued alerts targeting cartel-linked businesses, disrupting what experts estimated to be between $5 and $10 billion in annual financial flows. But money wasn't the endgame. The real shift came in the military and intelligence authorities that these designations enabled.
The tragic fate of the CJNG members who betrayed El Mencho.
Mi nombre es Carlos Enrique Sánchez Martínez. alias El Cholo, originario de Guadalajara, Jalisco.
After betraying El Mencho, Carlos Enrique Sanchez Martinez, El Cholo was captured, tortured, forced to confess on camera, and dumped on a park bench with knives pinning a warning to his body. And when Marcos Hernandez, El Colombiano, exposed cartel theft, El Cholo had him killed, which ignited a cartel war. Here is the tragic fate of CJNG members who betrayed El Mencho, Heriberto Acevedo Cárdenas, El Gringo. In the world of the CJNG, Heriberto Acevedo Cárdenas was the kind of man who made even hardened sicarios uneasy. Known by his alias El Gringo, a nickname earned on account of his fair complexion, as well as El Güero, Acevedo did not simply enforce the cartel's will. He redefined what enforcement meant. He joined the CJNG around 2011, initially serving as a personal bodyguard for Abundio Mendoza Gaitan, one of the organization's high-ranking members, but it did not take long for him to climb the ranks, eventually becoming the Jefe de Plaza, the local boss, for the entire Región Valles area in Jalisco, overseeing territories including Zacoalco de Torres, Tlajomulco de Zúñiga, Cocula, and Tapalpa. What set Acevedo apart from the rest of the CJNG's vast army of killers was something that can only be described as a signature of pure terror. According to authorities, Acevedo pioneered the use of dynamite as an execution method, strapping live explosives to the bodies of his victims while they were still breathing, and then detonating them. Videos recovered from his cell phone and the phones of his associates after his death confirmed this horrifying practice. In one recording, an adult male, bloodied and bound with duct tape, had an explosive device strapped to his chest before it was detonated in a forested area. The perpetrators could be heard celebrating with gunfire afterward. Acevedo was linked to at least 9 homicides and orchestrated a number of high-profile attacks, including the May 2014 ambush that killed 4 Mexican Army soldiers in Huachinango and the execution of 2 police investigators in Tlajomulco. He was also implicated in fuel theft, synthetic drug distribution, and enforced disappearances. His reign of terror came to an abrupt end on March 23, 2015, on the free highway near Zacoalco de Torres. Fleeing from officers of the Fuerza Única Jalisco, his vehicle overturned. Rather than surrender, Acevedo and 3 associates opened fire and even hurled a grenade at police. All 4 were killed in the ensuing gunfight. It was only after his death, when authorities sifted through the contents of his devices, that the full extent of his atrocities became known. But the story did not end there. The CJNG's retaliation for El Gringo's death was swift, devastating, and deeply calculated. Within days, on April 6, 2015, CJNG gunmen ambushed a police convoy in San Sebastián del Oeste, killing 15 officers and injuring 5. CJNG's new boss, extradited, joining El Chapo in Supermax prison.
There are 3 people who are going to compete to become the new leader of the cartel.
They killed the most powerful drug lord on the planet, and what happened next was worse. Within hours, Mexico was burning. Soldiers were ambushed. Airports were under siege. Tourists were trapped. And the man who was supposed to take over, he was already locked in a cell next to El Chapo. Who takes the throne? On the night of February 22, 2026, deep in the misty mountains of Jalisco, Mexico, a squad of Special Forces soldiers closed in on a rural compound in the small town of Tapalpa. Their target was the most wanted drug lord on planet Earth, a man with a $15 million bounty on his head, a man who had evaded capture for more than a decade, a man who had built what American intelligence described as one of the most powerful transnational criminal organizations on the planet. His name was Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes. The world knew him as El Mencho, and by dawn he would be dead, killed during a helicopter evacuation after a ferocious firefight that left 8 of his bodyguards lying in the dirt and rocket launchers scattered across the forest floor. His death would trigger a wave of retaliatory violence so catastrophic that it would leave dozens dead, paralyze entire cities, and strand thousands of tourists across western Mexico. But here is the detail that elevates this story from a tale of one man's violent end into something far more extraordinary. El Mencho's son, the man who was supposed to inherit the throne of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, was already locked away in the most secure prison on planet Earth. His name is Ruben Oseguera Gonzalez, known as El Menchito, and he is currently serving a sentence of life imprisonment plus 30 years inside ADX Florence, the federal Supermax facility in Colorado, the same facility where Joaquin El Chapo Guzman has been rotting since 2019. The heir to the most powerful cartel in Mexico is now El Chapo's neighbor in a concrete tomb buried under under the Rocky Mountains, locked inside a soundproof cell 23 hours a day, where no prisoner has ever escaped since the facility opened in 1994. El Mencho's son-in-law, a man who faked his own death to hide in suburban California, is also behind bars. His daughter, his brother, his brother-in-law, all of them have been swept up by the American justice system. The entire dynasty has been dismantled, and that leaves a terrifying question hanging in the air. One that has enormous implications not just for Mexico, but for the United States and the entire world. Who takes over? To understand the full weight of that question, you first need to understand who Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes truly was and what he built from nothing. Born on July 17, 1966, in the impoverished town of Aguililla in the Mexican state of Michoacán, El Mencho's trajectory from grinding rural poverty to the summit of global organized crime is one of the most remarkable and most terrifying ascents in the entire history of drug trafficking. He was, in his early years, a former police officer and avocado farmer. What happened to El Mencho's late girlfriend after she betrayed him? Amidst the chaos in Mexico, sources close to the underworld say El Mencho was betrayed from within his inner circle. His girlfriend's sudden disappearance wasn't random. It followed a secret decision that exposed hidden deals, internal fractures, and a dangerous truth the cartel wanted buried. Here's the full gist. The woman, the most wanted man in Mexico, trusted. For years, Nemesio Ruben Oseguera Cervantes sat at the top of the most dangerous criminal organization in the Western Hemisphere. Known to the world as El Mencho, he built the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or Cjng, into one of Mexico's most powerful and violent drug trafficking organizations. His empire stretched across continents, his soldiers numbered in the thousands. His product, fentanyl, methamphetamine, cocaine, flooded American streets by the ton, and for the better part of a decade, no government on earth could put their hands on him. Not the Mexican military, not the DEA, not the CIA, nobody. El Mencho moved like a ghost through the mountains of Jalisco, switching locations constantly, trusting almost no one, and staying so far off the grid that even the most advanced surveillance tools came up empty. He had survived assassination attempts, cartel wars, military raids, and political crackdowns. He had outlasted rivals, outmaneuvered informants, and outsmarted some of the best intelligence agencies on the planet. The United States government had placed a $15 million bounty on his head, one of the highest ever offered for a drug lord. And still, year after year, El Mencho remained untouchable. His capture or killing would have been the most significant blow against organized crime in Mexico since the recapture of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman back in 2016. Everybody knew it, and everybody also knew that the man seemed impossible to find. But then something changed, and it did not come from a wiretap. It did not come from a satellite. It did not come from a turned lieutenant or a rival snitch. It came from a woman, one single woman. A woman El Mencho had led into his inner circle, into his most private spaces, into the one place he believed was safe. And whether she did it on purpose or whether she never even knew what was happening around her, that is the question the entire world is still trying to answer. Because on February 22, 2026, Mexican Special Forces tracked El Mencho to a secluded cabin in the mountains of Tapalpa, Jalisco, and they did it by following her. They followed the woman he trusted. They followed the woman he loved. And by the time the dust settled, El Mencho was dead. Dozens more were dead in retaliatory violence across the country, and this woman, this mysterious figure at the center of one of the biggest cartel stories in modern history, had vanished without a trace. Her name, according to multiple reports and leaked military documents, is Guadalupe Moreno Carrillo. And before we get into what happened to her after the raid, you need to understand exactly who she was, how she got close to one of the most paranoid and well-protected men alive, and why her mere presence in his life became the single thread that unraveled everything. El Mencho was not a man who let people in easily.
For over 3 decades, no government on Earth could find him. Not Mexico, not the United States, not the DEA with a $15 million bounty on his head. He did not use phones. He communicated through handwritten letters. He moved through the mountains like a ghost, surrounded by an army, invisible to the world. And in the end, it was not a satellite that found him. It was not a wiretap. It was not a drone. It was a woman. A secret visit to a cabin in the mountains of Jalisco. A romantic encounter that was supposed to last one night became the thread that unraveled 3 decades of invisibility and led to the death of the most wanted drug lord on the planet. But now, in the aftermath, the internet has exploded with a different story. One that points not to the real woman intelligence agencies were tracking, but to a 25-year-old influencer and OnlyFans model named Maria Julissa, whose life has been turned upside down by a storm of viral lies, AI-generated photos, and fabricated audio clips. Tonight, we untangle the truth from the fiction. Who actually led authorities to El Mencho? Was she a knowing collaborator or an unwitting pawn? And is the influencer the internet is blaming actually innocent? This is the story of how love, betrayal, and disinformation collided in the most dramatic cartel takedown in Mexican history. Let's start with what we actually know, what Mexican authorities have officially confirmed. On Monday, February 23rd, General Ricardo Trevilla Trejo, head of Mexico's Defense Department, stood before the press and laid out the timeline that led to El Mencho's death. The key to the entire operation was not a military breakthrough or a technology innovation. It was old-fashioned intelligence work focused on one thing: the Druglords' romantic life. The woman at the center of the operation is Guadalupe Moreno Carrillo. Her name first surfaced publicly 4 years ago, in October 2022, when the hacker collective known as Guacamaya Leaks carried out a massive breach of Mexico's Defense Department servers. Among the thousands of classified documents that spilled onto the internet was a National Guard intelligence report that mapped the internal structure of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. In that report, Guadalupe Moreno Carrillo was identified as El Mencho's current romantic partner, his girlfriend after his separation from his wife, Rosalinda Gonzalez Valencia, who had been arrested for money laundering in 2021. But Moreno Carrillo was not listed as just a companion. The leaked documents placed her in a section titled Regional Coordinators and Plaza Chiefs, suggesting she held an active role within the cartel's operational structure, not just a personal relationship with its leader. No specific functions or territories were detailed, but her inclusion in that category raised immediate red flags within intelligence circles. For the next 4 years, her name went quiet. Until now. According to General Trevilla's account, military intelligence had been monitoring El Mencho's inner circle for months. They knew a critical detail about the most wanted man in the world. He avoided all electronic devices. No phones, no radios. He communicated exclusively through handwritten letters to minimize any digital footprint. He lived in constant motion through the mountainous terrain between Jalisco, Michoacan, and Colima, never staying in one place for long. His paranoia had kept him alive for decades. But there was one vulnerability. Even the most disciplined ghost needs human connection. Intelligence agencies had identified Guadalupe Moreno Carrillo as the weak link. On February 14th, Valentine's Day, military intelligence first detected Moreno Carrillo's movements and began tracking her. For 6 days, they followed her trail. Then, on February 20th, they identified a trusted associate, a man close to Moreno Carrillo, transporting her to a cabin complex in the mountain town of Tapalpa, Jalisco. This was a pre-arranged meeting point. El Mencho was there, waiting with his security detail. On February 21st, Moreno Carrillo left the compound. El Mencho stayed. He remained in the cabin with his armed escort, apparently confident that his location was still secure. That was his fatal mistake. Military intelligence confirmed his presence and began planning the assault. A three-pronged operation was designed, with ground forces, an aerial component with 6 helicopters, and a special operations unit. On the morning of February 22nd, they moved in. The rest, the firefight, the chase through the forest, the helicopter evacuation. The death in mid-flight is now history. The woman who unwittingly revealed his hiding place had already left. She was gone before the first shot was fired. Now here is where the story takes a bizarre and disturbing turn. Within hours of the Defense Department's press conference, When authorities said that a romantic partner had been key to locating El Mencho, but provided no names, the internet did what the internet does. It filled the void with speculation, conspiracy theories, and outright
Nemesio Ruben Oseguera Cervantes, also known as El Mencho, spent a decade as the most wanted criminal in the Western Hemisphere and remained invisible to the agencies hunting him. He co-founded the Jalisco New Generation Cartel around 2010 and built it into a global empire with breathtaking speed, specializing in the drugs of the modern era, methamphetamine and fentanyl. The US State Department designated his cartel a foreign terrorist organization in early 2025. Washington put a $15 million bounty on his head. He survived by trusting almost no one, moving constantly, never photographed, always rumored to be dead, until Sunday. Every intelligence agency on Earth had failed to pin him down. What cracked the case was simpler: a woman's visit to a mountain hideout. On February 20th, Mexican military intelligence, working with US Northern Command, received a concrete tip. A trusted associate of one of El Mencho's romantic partners could lead them to him. The location, Tapalpa, a picturesque colonial town 130 kilometers from Guadalajara, and a vacation compound called Cabanas La Loma, previously sanctioned by the US Treasury for supporting the CJNG. The lover visited El Mencho on Saturday. Then she left, he stayed, and planning began within the hour. On February 20th, Intel confirmed El Mencho's location. US Northern Command provided surveillance support. A 24-hour clock started ticking. On February 21st, the romantic partner met with Oseguera at Cabanas La Loma, confirming his presence. She left, but he stayed with his security detail. The trap was set. On February 22nd, the National Guard's Special Reaction Force closed a perimeter. Troops staged outside Jalisco to keep the element of surprise. Then they closed in. El Mencho's men opened fire with assault weapons and rocket launchers. 8 cartel members died. 2 soldiers were wounded. El Mencho and 2 bodyguards fled into dense woods. Special forces split up to chase them. They found him hiding in the undergrowth, critically wounded, but alive. El Mencho and his 2 bodyguards reportedly died en route to the hospital. Later, S-fighter jet carried the bodies to Mexico City. Cjng, the powerful cartel that El Mencho led, responded immediately. Hundreds of flaming roadblocks went up across multiple states. Grocery stores were attacked. Open gunfights erupted with the military. Schools were shut. Airlines halted flights. The US Embassy told Americans to take shelter. At least 27 members of the Mexican National Guard were killed in 6 separate attacks in a single day. The country held its breath.
It's not possible to get out right now because first, we're not allowed to leave the resort under any circumstance, so we're locked down in the resort. And even if we went out on the streets, the cartel would stop us and force us to get out of the car and light the car on fire. So the whole city is under lockdown. No one is going out because everyone is scared of getting stopped by the cartel. I can't even go home even if I wanted to because New York is in a snowstorm blizzard. I hope that it ends soon.
President Claudia Sheinbaum, who had authorized the operation partly to satisfy the Trump administration, went before cameras and called for calm. analysts warn the power vacuum El Mencho leaves behind could trigger a brutal succession war. His son is imprisoned in the US, his wife arrested on money laundering charges, 2 brothers jailed in Mexico. The line of succession, as one expert put it, has been broken. Meanwhile, the rival Sinaloa cartel, already fragmented since El Chapo's extradition, may see opportunity. 4 Cjng commanders are believed to be vying for control. A negotiated transition is possible, so is all-out war between factions. Mexico has felled its most feared cartel king. The achievement is historic, comparable in significance to Colombia's killing of Pablo Escobar in 1993, or the capture of El Chapo Guzman. But history also shows what follows such moments: chaos, fragmentation, and often the emergence of something worse than what came before. The Cjng built its empire on speed, brutality, and adaptability. Its lieutenants are trained in that image. Whether they consolidate under new leadership, splinter into warring factions, or trigger a broader conflict with the Sinaloa cartel will shape the trajectory of drug trafficking and the fentanyl crisis in the United States for years to come. El Mencho is dead in a Tapalpa forest. The cartel he built is still breathing. And Mexico, with the World Cup 6 months away, is watching the mountains of Jalisco for what comes next. Nemesio Ruben Oseguera Cervantes, also known as El Mencho, spent a decade as the most wanted criminal in the Western Hemisphere and remained invisible to the agencies hunting him. He co-founded the Jalisco New Generation Cartel around 2010 and built it into a global empire with breathtaking speed, specializing in the drugs of the modern era, methamphetamine and fentanyl. The US State Department designated his cartel a foreign terrorist organization in early 2025. Washington put a $15 million bounty on his head. He survived by trusting almost no one, moving constantly, never photographed, always rumored to be dead, until Sunday. Every intelligence agency on Earth had failed to pin him down. What cracked the case was simpler: a woman's visit to a mountain hideout. On February 20th, Mexican military intelligence, working with US Northern Command, received a concrete tip. A trusted associate of one of El Mencho's romantic partners could lead them to him. The location, Tapalpa, a picturesque colonial town 130 kilometers from Guadalajara, and a vacation compound called Cabanas La Loma, previously sanctioned by the US Treasury for supporting the Cjng. The lover visited El Mencho on Saturday. Then she left, he stayed, and planning began within the hour. On February 20th, Intel confirmed El Mencho's location. US Northern Command provided surveillance support. A 24-hour clock started ticking. On February 21st, the romantic partner met with Oseguera at Cabanas La Loma, confirming his presence. She left, but he stayed with his security detail. The trap was set. On February 22nd, the National Guard's Special Reaction Force closed a perimeter. Troops staged outside Jalisco to keep the element of surprise. Then they closed in. El Mencho's men opened fire with assault weapons and rocket launchers. 8 cartel members died. 2 soldiers were wounded. El Mencho and 2 bodyguards fled into dense woods. Special forces split up to chase them. They found him hiding in the undergrowth, critically wounded but alive. El Mencho and his 2 bodyguards reportedly died en route to the hospital. Later, fighter jet carried the bodies to Mexico City. Cjng, the powerful cartel that El Mencho led, responded immediately. Hundreds of flaming roadblocks went up across multiple states. Grocery stores were attacked. Open gunfights erupted with the military. Schools were shut. Airlines halted flights. The US Embassy told Americans to take shelter. At least 27 members of the Mexican National Guard were killed in 6 separate attacks in a single day. The country held its breath.
It's not possible to get out right now because first, we're not allowed to leave the resort under any circumstance, so we're locked down in the resort. And even if we went out on the streets, the cartel would stop us and force us to get out of the car and light the car on fire. So the whole city is under lockdown. No one is going out because everyone is scared of getting stopped by the cartel. I can't even go home even if I wanted to because New York is in a snowstorm, blizzard. I hope that it ends soon.
President Claudia Sheinbaum, who had authorized the operation partly to satisfy the Trump administration, went before cameras and called for calm. Analysts warn the power vacuum El Mencho leaves behind could trigger a brutal succession war. His son is imprisoned in the US, his wife arrested on money laundering charges, 2 brothers jailed in Mexico. The line of succession, as one expert put it, has been broken. Meanwhile, the rival Sinaloa cartel, already fragmented since El Chapo's extradition, may see opportunity. 4 Cjng commanders are believed.
A sleek, modern villa was where Mencho Oseguera, leader of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, spent his final hours. Reuters footage shows the home's messy kitchen, with cartons of milk, spoiled strawberries, unfinished pastry, and boxes of produce left on the floor. Bottles of hygiene and skincare products, vitamins, and empty boxes of luxury items were also found inside. There is also a small makeshift altar with Catholic figures including the Virgin of Guadalupe, Mexico's patroness, and St. Jude, the patron saint of lost causes. The 2-story villa sits inside the exclusive Tapalpa Country Club, a gated enclave of weekend homes in the hills of Jalisco. Authorities had been led there by a tip tied to Oseguera's lover. Burned-out cars and trucks sat on some of the roads encircling the compound after a siege-like raid by the military on Sunday. Oseguera, better known as El Mencho, tried to escape through the back garden to a wooded hillside but was hit by gunfire during the pursuit. Authorities said he died of his injuries while being airlifted away. Tapalpa has faced scrutiny before. 10 years ago, the U.S. Treasury Department imposed sanctions on several businesses in the area, alleging they were used to launder money for the Jalisco cartel and its financial arm.
Fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing.
From a simple vendor to the most powerful cartel leader in Mexico with a $15 million U.S. bounty on his head, Nemesio Oseguera, known as El Mencho, made headlines after a federal operation ended his life and sparked a wave of violence and road blockades across Mexico. So who is he? And what do we know about this name? El Mencho, 59, led one of the most dangerous criminal networks in the world. He moved tons of cocaine from Colombia through Ecuador to Mexico's Pacific coast using speedboats and submarines. He was known for his military tactics, deploying hundreds of heavily armed, well-trained gunmen, including former Special Forces members from Colombia. Rarely seen in public, he operated from heavily fortified mountain compounds. The U.S. Treasury Department previously described him as the largest cocaine trafficker into the United States, with vast networks involved in fuel theft and cross-border criminal operations. Years of pursuit have finally ended, but the fall of El Mencho does not mean the end of the cartel. Rather, it opens a new chapter in Mexico's long war against organized crime.
According to Mexico's defense minister, Ricardo Trevilla, Mexican special forces were able to kill Rubén Oseguera Cervantes after a gunfight thanks to following his romantic partner, or one of them. You know why shows like Narcos are so good? It's because they're based on real events. And now we're seeing the series of events that also plays like a movie happen before our eyes. This person had been on the DEA's radar for many, many years. There was a $50 million bounty on his head. Both U.S. and Mexican authorities had been trying to track him down and stop him. So Mexican military intelligence was able to track down and start surveilling and following a trusted associate of one of El Mencho's romantic partners. They followed this person to a location in Tapalpa, Jalisco on Friday, who was escorting this romantic partner to meet with El Mencho and spend the night. A Mexican military official said that the exact location was identified thanks to very important additional information provided by U.S. intelligence. And it's worth noting that even though President Trump and President Claudia Sheinbaum could not be further apart politically, ideologically speaking, there has been increased cooperation when it comes to counter cartel operations, especially when it comes to surveillance and intelligence between the U.S. and Mexico in a task force that was formed and that has been beefed up over the last several months. Okay, back to the woman. The woman spends the night on Friday night. Saturday morning, when she leaves, units from the Mexican Army and the National Guard surrounded the area. They had confirmed that El Mencho had a specialized security detail to protect him. The Mexican Air Force was standing by, and the Mexican President, Claudia Sheinbaum, who was traveling, was kept informed of everything that was going on. Before dawn on Sunday, when it was absolutely confirmed that El Mencho was there in this area by his property, or around his property, or in his property, they decided to attack. General Trevilla, Mexico's defense secretary, said that the response from the cartel and from the security detail was extremely violent. And yet, no Mexican soldiers were killed. Several were injured, and 8 members of the cartel were killed. El Mencho didn't die there. He was injured along with another person from his crew, airlifted, and allegedly died on the way to a hospital. At this point, the Mexican military who were taking him back to a hospital in Jalisco, when he was dead, decided, no, let's take him to Mexico City for safety. Suddenly, more than 60 miles west of Tapalpa, a man known as El Tuli, who's allegedly El Mencho's right-hand man, launches a whole aggressive, violent operation. He was the one who masterminded all of those blockades that we saw emerged in Jalisco. And this person tells his own soldiers from the cartel that he will pay $1,000 per soldier, Mexican soldier from the Army or the National Guard, that they kill. And that's how more than 24 Mexican National Guard members are killed. At least one civilian is killed in Jalisco and a few others. But ultimately, a paratrooper Mexican rifle brigade is able to identify where El Tuli is, and they kill him too. So now you ask, number one and number two of Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación are dead. Is this the end of the problem? Obviously not. If you've watched Narcos or followed the events that happen after the killing of a major drug kingpin and his close circle, this is not the end. There are succession wars, there are turf wars, and Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación is not the only cartel operating in Mexico. It's also not the end, and I might stress, because it is not the end of the demand for the drugs that empower and enrich these cartels.
Now that El Mencho is dead, who will take over and become his successor? Let's talk about it. Now, El Mencho has one son, a person called Ruben Asaguera. However, he is serving life in prison plus 30 years at the ADX Supermax in Colorado currently. We would have to assume that the most likely successor is El Mencho's stepson, a person called Juan Carlos Valencia, aka 03. 03's mother is a woman called Rosalinda Valencia. At one point, she was married to El Mencho. His father was a drug trafficker. All his uncles were drug traffickers. And he has known El Mencho for decades, obviously being his stepson. He heads a group called Grupo Elite, which you've probably seen in various videos. They're one of the armed wings of Cjng. He was actually born in California and is only 42 years old. Very connected, very high up, very young. Definitely, for sure, I would assume would be the successor most likely. Now, other people that could take over include a guy called Audias Flores Silva, aka El Jardinero, aka the Gardener. He is an extremely powerful regional leader of Cjng. Born in Michoacan, he not only controls areas of his home state, but as well as Jalisco and most of the Mexican state of Nayarit. He controls both economical and operational resources on behalf of the cartel. Keep in mind, he has a $5 million bounty on his head by this country. Another person that will continue to be a major higher up is this guy, a man called Gonzalo Mendoza Gaitan, aka El Sapo. El Sapo is said to be the plaza boss of Puerto Vallarta, which is a big-time stronghold. Keep in mind, he also has extensive control, and the fact that he controls Puerto Vallarta, which is a tourist destination, he's done a great job, allegedly funneling money through various nightclubs, bars. That money laundering ability is very good, and he's actually been quite trusted. No matter how you slice it, the death of El Mencho is gigantic. In fact, I never thought it would actually happen in terms of him being killed. That said, there are very powerful people that are underneath him or were underneath him. It's anybody's guess. That said, I would assume that his stepson takes over. That said, there's a lot of high-profile people up top. They're still a very high-level drug trafficking organization. In fact, they're one of the biggest in the world.
You see it. That's the list right there of the potential successors of El Mencho. who could take over the CNG cartel. They haven't came out yet who's going to be the successor, but when the news break or when I find out, we most definitely will be breaking it. We most definitely will be covering it. We most definitely will be dropping it, breaking it down, repackaging up. But you see it right there. Who will be the successor? They are made already have made a decision and just don't want to let nobody know. But when the word comes out and when I do find out, we most definitely gonna be breaking it down. We most definitely gonna be letting everybody know who is the leader of the new cartel CNG. Smash that like button, hit the subscribe button. Most definitely go to my second YouTube channel, S.L.R Sports News TV. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, comment on both channels. As I say, it's all free. Make sure you hit that Cash App too. All information is picked at the top of the ticket. And if you're looking for the like button, it's the 3 dots. The upper dot on the right hand side. But if you're not watching the live, the like button should be there for you to smash. So make sure you smash that like button. Mexican cartel leader El Mencho. CNG Boss Mexico War on Druglords Part 4. Make sure you get ready to tune in for Part 5. Like, subscribe, share, comment to my YouTube channel. You know what to do. Subscribe. I'm out. Peace.